So welcome to another episode of Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle, and today we're diving into the power of resiliency, how we build it, how we lose it, and how we can reclaim it during our times of stress. Joining me in this insightful conversation is Diane Wolf. Hello, Diane. And Diane's work as a psychotherapist has allowed her to work with neuroscience and with compassion. Diane brings a deep understanding of how our attitude about stress can actually shape our ability to recover. And from there, our ability to explore the way that our mind is working, how it can affect our personal well-being, and then the health of our relationships, and extend that out to community, and how the whole fabric of community is affected by the way we feel. Mm-hmm. Diane is a registered psychotherapist and former business professor. She bridges neuroscience and business strategy to empower business owners to turn high-pressure challenges into clarity, resiliency, and long-term success. So the results of that are greater productivity, less burnout, and sharper decision-making, fueling stronger leadership and team performance. So you may ask, what does that have to do with resiliency in stressful times? But it's all interrelated, how we operate in our business day and how we operate in our personal day. Diane has over 40 years of expertise equipping leaders to recognize and disarm the hidden toll of stress on mental, physical, and emotional health. And that's the other piece we talk about a lot, about those different components of health. People don't realize how they separate out, but also then how they combine all together as well. She holds an MBA in Learning and Knowledge Management, I love that, and a master's in clinical counseling and certified clinical trauma professional. Her work with first responders battling PTSD gives her deep insight into resilience and what to do under extreme pressure. So a leader beyond the therapy room, Diane is past president of the Women's Business Network. She is a former Chamber of Commerce director. Thank you and good for you. That's a big role to take on. She blends professional authority with personal wisdom to help leaders thrive under pressure. So Diane, thank you for coming, sharing this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so happy to be here with you today, Michelle. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, we always start the episode off with, first of all, I'm going to set the intention, which we already know is finding resiliency in times of stress. And then from there is always about activating it. We do that with a cup of tea. So what did you choose to put in your cup today?
This is called Clarity. It's a Clarity blend, and I add wildflower local honey because it's allergy season, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that if you use local honey, apparently that really helps with allergies. So whether it helps or not, it's delicious.
Honey has so many amazing contributions that it has, particularly if it's local, which is great. So yeah, I have a tea called Mental Clarity. So it's fun that you chose the one with that title. And as we're thinking about the conversation today, that would have worked also. I have added Releasing the Warrior. And it's interesting, as soon as I chose this tea, it's like its volume went up. So as I was working on the script last night, Releasing the Warrior is a tea that if you come visit me at one of the markets that I sell tea at, if you smell the tea, you either like it or you completely don't like it. And it depends on your day and it depends on your goal, because you can at one time sniff it and go, oh, that's really quite nice. And then the next time it's like, whoa, that is the worst tea ever. And so it's a lovely blend for people to realize it really calls you when it says, you go, oh, this smells great. That's the one that you definitely want to take in and harness. So I don't know any of the other teas operating the same way as this particular one. So it has a personality.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring forward a couple of ideas, and this is leading us into our talk about stress. So Releasing the Warrior is for the wood element. So in Chinese medicine, that's your supports, like being the trunk of the tree. You've got the branches going up, you've got your roots going down into the ground. And this is the tea that really grounds you and brings you back home. There's a lot of ingredients in it, but I thought I'd bring out licorice, burdock, and dandelion. I've been picking dandelion petals for another tea, and these three are really solid rooted pieces, and we actually in the tea usually use the roots of them. So that's the way it comes forward. But it's great for rooting, grounding, cleansing, and revitalizing. And that's also part of the conversation today is yes, you
Yeah.
can have stress, but how you're going to look at it and how you deal with it can help you revitalize. So I wanted to bring you the affirmation on the package. So this is setting people in place. So as you're listening to the podcast, I want you to just think about your goal that you might have around this topic or your goal just in general for today or the week. And then as we continue in our conversation, we're actually going to weave you through a healing process because of the way it's set up. And I'm going to start it off with the affirmation that's on the front of the package. So linked to the wood element, this blend supports opening up to express what is most important, to nourish, rejuvenate, and reorganize for full potential.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
So I thought I'd just share that with you. So yeah. Okay. I would like to do a little cheers. So if you're listening, if you want to lift your cup, we'll cheer here. Thank you for coming to the show, and thank you, listeners, for being here as well. Oh my. And what's interesting is different flavors pop out each time as well. So sometimes you really suck into the licorice, and then other times it just like it goes back in the distance. I don't know. It's just an interesting blend. All right, Diane, let's dive in and
Alrighty.
get going with what we want to talk about. So we've got the inner warrior. We've got our resilience that we can work with. Do you want to share with us? I know I said neuroscience earlier, but what the neuroscience perspective is, what happens to the brain when we're under chronic stress, and then what does that do to impact our resiliency?
Oh, well, this is totally what I love to share with people. The first thing I say to any client is your brain is not broken. Your brain has a defense mechanism. And when your brain senses danger, whether that is a physical danger or a perceived danger, when your brain feels that you are in danger, it does the fight or flight reflex that people have heard of. And what that means is it releases cortisol and adrenaline to prepare you either to, fight the wild animal in the jungle or run away from danger. And that response is healthy and normal, and it's supposed to be very rare and very temporary. And so your
Mm.
cortisol and adrenaline levels shoot up, and then you deal with the danger, and then gradually you return to equilibrium. And as long as that happens, every once in a while, your body can certainly handle it. The problem with chronic stress is that many of us are in situations where this response is not rare and temporary, it's almost daily. As you mentioned earlier, I work primarily with first responders who've been diagnosed with PTSD. And what happens is every day, at least once probably, they're running into a situation like a burning building or somebody has a gun or there's an accident scene, and your brain would be going, whoa, 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 don't go there. That's not safe. And you have to override that natural impulse. And if you do that on a daily basis, you end up with adrenal fatigue. The cortisol and adrenaline has nowhere to go. And people often end up having a breakdown after years of this. Your body just is not equipped to deal with this on a regular basis. In our society, as business leaders, business owners, we often face stress every day, worries about our business, worries about our team, financial issues. I mean, I don't need to list them all and depress everybody, but we all have a whole list of things that are causing stress. So we may be unaware that our stress response is triggered far more often than it should be. And so that cortisol and adrenaline that floods our body really has nowhere to go because chances are the solution to our issue is not to, kick our boss or run away. And so it circulates through our body and it can result in all sorts of negative health impacts. So the first thing we want to do is recognize what our own stress symptoms are and find ways to release that cortisol and adrenaline and regain equilibrium. But it's important to remember that stress response does not mean you're broken. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So what we need to do is manage it both preemptively and when the stress response happens so that we can return to optimal health.
Wow. I'm thinking about those first responders, and even as we approach some of our situations in our day where you do have to have that response come up. what do you do preemptively to set yourself up for that?
Okay, well, there are several things that we can do. Exercise is really important. I know everybody says, yeah, exercise is healthy, but I'm specifically talking about activity that gets your heart rate up because that tends to release the cortisol and adrenaline more quickly. Remember, that's flooding your body to prepare you for fight or flight. It's diverting energy to your limbs away from digestion so that you can do what you need to do. Because it's often not a physical response that is required, by putting that physical response in, going up and down a few sets of stairs, going for a brisk walk, clenching some of your muscles, we can release that cortisol and adrenaline and start to reduce that stress level. Preemptively, if we exercise on a regular basis, then we're constantly every day making sure that those cortisol and adrenaline levels start off at a baseline and aren't already elevated. So it's both preemptively exercising on a very regular basis, and then also when we feel stressed and agitated, and some well-meaning person says, just calm down, just breathe, relax. And we're like, we recognize we need to get that cortisol and adrenaline level down, and then we can activate the other side of the brain, which is the rest and digest and zen chill. It's not our fault if we can't relax when we're extremely agitated. There's just too much cortisol and adrenaline. We're not supposed to be able to relax. We're supposed to be able to run away from danger.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that people then think there's something wrong with them,
Mhm.
rather than thinking, what do I need to do in order to support what's happening? It's
Exactly.
just a tiny little reframing.
Totally. Yeah, it's a complete
Yeah.
reframe. Yeah, my brain is not broken. My brain is warning me of danger, even if it's not a danger that I recognize.
Hmm.
Our brain senses danger for all sorts of reasons.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, if I'm just interested with the first responders, then do you find that when they come to you, they've kept up that process of calming the system down through exercise, movement, breathing, or when they come to you, they haven't used any of those, and that's usually why you see them?
I see them because they've actually had a breakdown and are no longer able to work.
So they
They,
waited so long,
yeah,
they just
pretty much.
waited till they completely collapsed rather than coming to you right at the beginning, so they had those coping skills.
They ignore that in the beginning. They think it's normal. And many of them are in industries like law enforcement or firefighting, where the mantra is, suck it up, buttercup, you're trained for this, just get back on the job. And they think that's normal. And so when they come to me, they feel quite broken because they're no longer able to work. They've been restricted from firefighting or law enforcement or whatever has caused the trauma. And they feel that they have completely broken down. And so that's why the first thing I say is your brain is not broken. You've probably spent 15 years ignoring the signs that your brain is saying, you can't keep doing this. And so the first thing we work on is helping them understand that we need to reframe what stress is and that your stress response is not the enemy. You've just overused it.
Hmm. And it's much easier if your ankle doesn't work, you just can't walk on it. And then
Yep.
you can go have that part fixed. But the mind is completely different because there's so many key aspects within it. Um, and then the stressors too coming from the different places. Yes, it comes from work, but then you're fine at home tootling along, and then all of a sudden it's not fine at home. Something's happened and stress has improved or increased there, and that can be the tipping point.
For sure. Our brain doesn't
Yeah.
compartmentalize. So the trauma that one sees at work is also exacerbated by trauma that you may have in your life, even going back to childhood trauma, or if you're going through a divorce or something. I mean, trauma accumulates and your brain doesn't go, well, that's work trauma. We'll set that one over here. And so at some point, you literally run into a situation. I'm working with a law enforcement officer, for example, 25 years on the job, absolutely loved it. And one day was writing a report about a fairly minor incident, and he froze and was unable to write. He
Mm.
could not, like, literally write his notes.
Hmm.
Scared him half to death,
Hmm.
but we've been, in treatment for quite a while, and he's doing very well. And he realizes now that for years he went to some pretty awful traumatic incidents and then just went right back to work and get back on the horse, and this is good. And it turned out to be a very minor one where his brain finally said, enough, we're freezing you. We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about those people that might be listening, and
Mhm.
you may be at the start of your career and listening to those of us who've walked that road, and I went till I couldn't walk anymore. So I was broken, definitely broken, and had to rebuild my entire body. So rather than do that lesson, which is a long, slow process lesson, but it has lots of rich things in it. But if you could start your career with a wellness team, you have a therapist like you that's able to say, here's how you cope, here's how you make it happen. And I might see you once or twice a year, and we'll just check in, make sure everything's good, and carry on, rather than waiting till that direness of then you've got a major crisis that you have to try to sort through for them.
It's funny. I joke that I'm trying to work myself out of a job as a therapist, but many of my clients have said, where were you 15 years ago? If I had learned all these strategies then and had these tools in my toolbox, maybe I could have avoided a breakdown. And while I would never promise that I can prevent a breakdown, I can certainly tell you if you implement these stress management strategies as early as possible. I work with my 17-year-old granddaughter on managing stress this way, then certainly you will be much better off. And it's not rocket science. There are some very simple things to do. We just don't do them because we don't know how important they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then where do you go for help, and how do you ask for it, and who is the right person? Yeah. So, which leads to a really good question too, which is not following any of the questions I wrote down for you. However, I'm thinking about, okay, someone's listening and they're going, okay, I want to have a wellness plan. I want to go forward, and I want my career. I want to be able to manage all of the pieces in such a great way to have that resiliency. So how do they find you?
Okay, well, I've created a resilience roadmap, which anyone is welcome to access if they like. There's no cost for that. That's at my website, which is dianewolf.com/stress. And they can go and download that. And basically that explains the neuroscience of stress that I've just mentioned. But then it also has a whole list of possible symptoms that are indicators of stress. Now, I do want to make sure that I list this disclaimer that I am not a doctor. So, for example, you'll see on there heart palpitations or headaches, and I don't want someone to look at that and go, oh, well, I thought I was having a heart attack, but it's probably just stress. You really go see a doctor. If you have chest pains, agitation, high blood pressure, any of those things, go check with a doctor. But myself, it's probably 30 years ago now, when I was going through chest pains and a lot of stress and career stuff, I went and had my heart checked, and the doctor said, oh, your heart is fine at all the tests. Your heart is fine. It's just anxiety and stress. And I thought, whoa, I had no idea it could mimic physical symptoms. So in the resilience roadmap, we divide the symptoms into three categories. And there's cognitive, things like brain fog, memory loss. People often come to me and they say, I don't know, maybe I have early onset dementia. I just can't think clearly anymore. And I say, well, you do realize that's a really common stress symptom. Again, I can't diagnose that you don't have something organic going on, but I can tell you that brain fog, memory loss, confusion are classic hallmarks of someone whose stress bucket is completely full. We also have physical symptoms, an inability to get to sleep, a difficulty staying asleep, sometimes both. You may find, the chest pains, the racing heart, the agitation. You may find that you clench your jaw. You may go to a dentist and have them say, you need to get a mouth guard. Are you aware that you're clenching your teeth while you sleep? So there's a whole list of symptoms, emotional symptoms, being more teary than usual. Again, it's perfectly normal to cry. I'm a big fan of crying. It can be very cathartic. But if you feel that your moods are different from what you consider your norm and you're more easily frustrated or more easily brought to tears, those are all signs that your brain is sending you saying, hello, we need to check your engine.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so for students out there who are studying for exams, finishing off projects, that list could be very helpful for you to navigate, realizing the way you're thinking about those projects might be really putting you in the wrong place, which is then they're running to, having been a student, the extra caffeinated drinks, more chocolate, chips, because then you can munch, get your jaw going. You go for all those things that make you feel like you're de-stressing, but then you add all that stuff into the body, and the body doesn't know what to do with it, and then you ramp it up, so you create a cycle effect there.
I would never judge anyone for using coping mechanisms like chocolate or chips or coffee for sure, but I think it's important that we understand what is it that we're trying to do. And adding coffee adds agitation for most people. Caffeine is not a good thing to take. And if we're sleep deprived, we think that caffeine will help keep us awake, but it doesn't facilitate cognitive functioning. When we're under stress, the brain can bypass cognitive functioning. So studying cramming the night before or studying when you're feeling stressed, you're not likely to retain very much. So it's
Mhm.
really looking at if I'm a student, and it's funny, many years ago, I was a young mom, I was taking 6 courses to finish my one of my degrees. And I made a list of all the assignments I had to do between, I think, March and the end of the year. And when I looked at the list, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown because I remember thinking, there's no way I can do all this. So I ripped up the list and focused on what's the next thing I have to do. But the most important strategy I use when I need to be, mentally clear is I get enough sleep. And every once in a while, someone will say to me, well, I get by on 4 to 5 hours of sleep. And I say, I'm not talking about getting by. I'm talking about getting 8 to 9 hours of restorative sleep every night so that you can function at an optimal level. We're not
Mhm.
talking about surviving. Yes, you can probably survive on 4 to 5 hours, but how well are you thriving?
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Wow. I so love chatting with you.
Me too.
Now, you've seen clients' beliefs and attitudes about stress as they've come through the door, and then how they probably, as you're working with them, continue to sabotage their recovery. Can you talk a little bit about how that process, what you see unfolding in front of you?
So when they first come to me and I talk about these strategies, I talk about the 5 pillars that we need to want to get in order. And one is sleep, getting proper restorative sleep, which is something people often have to work on. A lot of my clients definitely have sleep disturbances. A lot of them have been shift workers. And there's nothing worse for sleep than being a shift worker, to be honest. I hate to say that because I know we have no choice. We need doctors to work at night and firefighters, but shift work is difficult to overcome. They also need a support network. And a lot of them come to me and they feel a lot of shame that, I used to be a competent firefighter. I used to be a really good nurse. And now I feel like I'm crying all the time and I can't function. So it's sometimes difficult for them to seek out support. Now, seeing a therapist is a form of support. That's great. Come see me. But also having a circle of friends or family members where you can be completely honest and say, I'm not doing okay. I don't know what's going on with me. I feel overwhelmed. And again, that's not just for first responders, that's for all of us. We need to have some people in our lives where we feel we can be absolutely honest and sort of fall apart with someone and have them say, it's okay, I'll help you. I'll help you.
Hmm.
We will pick each other up. So we've got sleep, we've got a support network. I mentioned the value of exercise already. Really important to fuel your body properly. I'm not a dietitian. I wouldn't dream to tell people whether they should be, I don't know, vegan or keto, any of that. That's not my jam. What I do know, though, is that there are certain substances that are absolutely necessary for brain health. And those would be, for example, the omega-3 healthy fats. And we went through, you probably remember, I don't know, what was that 15, 20 years ago, the whole low fat craze. We were all eating like rice crackers. Oh, no,
Hmm.
thank back to olive oil and almonds and olives and all the good stuff. So there are certain substances that are really crucial to maintain proper nutrition. And I recommend that everyone see an holistic nutritionist or someone, like yourself who has expertise in that area to find out like what are those substances I should be taking. And then finally, in some cases, medication is required. I'm not permitted to diagnose or to prescribe anything. But for some people, taking medication can certainly help reduce the stress levels while they're working on getting all of their other ducks in a row. And I listened to a psychologist a number of years ago, or psychiatrist from University of Toronto, and he said of those 5 pillars that I mentioned, sleep, exercise, proper nutrition, support network, and medication, only medication is optional. That's the other 4 are absolutely required. The fifth, you talk to your doctor, you see, and your doctor will know whether that's something you need to make use of as well. But I thought that was really interesting that a psychiatrist said meds are the optional one. The other 4, non-negotiable.
It is funny because when you said that, what's the first thing everybody goes to, right? I'm going to medicate myself. And I see that with tea, and I see it at the markets when people ask me what tea is good for. Or does your tea have chamomile in it? Because they want to treat it like a medicine. And then they just want to take the medicine and it's going to make them sleep. I always sound like, I go through my checklist too, okay, let's look at your sleep, and if you're going to take this tea is going to be very helpful all day long, not just
Mhm.
when you go to bed, because you can't have a good sleep because you decided at 8 o'clock now you're going to pay attention to it. You have to know all day long that you've done everything for when you get to the bed.
It's
Yeah,
a sleep is a lifestyle 24/7. It's not something that happens at 10 o'clock at night.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's funny. Because when you said it to me, it was just like it was like this light went off, and I thought, well, I've never even thought about it in those terms. But that, yeah, medicine is an option. If you go for a medical opinion, then you're asking for a medical answer.
Mhm.
But have you taken care of those pillars ahead of time so that you've taken out all of the things that could be a challenge?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They say, I mean, studies have shown that things like exercise can be as effective as antidepressants. But again, I don't discourage people from taking medication. That's a very personal decision. For some people, it really does help. But for many people, it isn't required if they get the other four pillars in order.
Hmm.
And even if you do go the route of taking meds, you still want to get the other four pillars in order.
Hmm. I'm a avid Tai Chier. That's probably an understatement at this point because I'm so passionate about it. But one of the studies that came through recently was that Tai Chi actually is the only one that adjusts the exercise forms that actually adjusts all of the index of health. It
Ooh.
affects every one of them. And it was like, wow, now that's a statement to be able to make because we often choose things that are good for you, like you said, like the different diet fads, but that only affects one aspect of the health index, which would be nutrition. And when you're working with Tai Chi, it actually affects all of them. You make completely different choices as a result of that daily practice. And I don't know what the measurement of yoga is. I haven't seen a study for that one, but I would assume it would be fairly similar
I would think so.
in its outcome. But very interesting for people as they're thinking about what they're doing. And again, just because we brought up the students and studying and those kinds of things, to think about in what way are you engaging in those other aspects of your life besides studying all the time and making sure you've read everything and finished your assignments. Those other pieces are part of what helps you to study and also to retain. And
And to retain, yeah.
and you
And
can
that's,
retain a lot of great things while you're at the sink doing the dishes,
yeah. We
you
also
know?
have things we can listen to while we're learning, but studying really tends to function on a law of what I call diminishing returns. Sometimes the more we study, if we're not doing it in a way that our cognitive functioning is key and we're well rested, it just doesn't help. And studies have also shown that cramming the night before a test, we don't tend to retain very much. It's much better to study on a regular basis in small bits and to get a really good night's sleep the night before your test.
Hmm.
Then
Yeah.
you're consolidating that learning while you sleep, and you're much more likely to retain the learning than if you stay up till 4 o'clock studying.
Hmm. Hmm. And then have your caffeine before you walk into that exam. All right, let's shift a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the role of disconnection. So how people disconnect from themselves, disconnect from other people, and then what that does to stress and diminishing resiliency.
Well, I mentioned one of the five pillars is having a support network. But often when people are feeling that they are broken or they are feeling shame that they can't function the way they used to, they don't want to talk to people. They don't want people to see them like this. So isolation is a very, very common response. And many of the clients I see, they're off work officially. They're under a workers' compensation program. They have to come and see me. I don't know how many of them would actually choose to. I can say I have a great relationship with my clients, and I honestly believe they're all very happy they've come, but they didn't come of their own free will. They were told, like, you need to go see a therapist, and here's where you're going. So the first session is always quite interesting because you can tell they come in a little reluctant. And the first thing I say is, your brain is not broken. I explain a bit, and then you can see them sort of visibly relax. But having a support network is really important. Also, because sometimes we're not very good at seeing our stress in ourselves. it's already a step forward when someone's willing to look into that and read my symptom list. Prior to that, people often think, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm fine. And they're in complete denial. And without having close relationships with people around them who can say, you're not okay. Something's going on. We're going to go have a cup of tea, one of, Michelle's great teas, and we're going to have a chat and we're going to figure out what's going on. But people often don't want that. So
Mhm,
that self-isolation is self-imposed, and that's why having a support network is one of the five pillars. It's not optional. We
mhm,
are interdependent creatures. We can't do this on our own, and sometimes we're not even aware at how stressed we really are because we're
mhm,
in denial.
mhm, mhm. That's what living here in Cape Breton Island is lovely. It was one of the things we enjoyed most when we were visiting here before we chose to move here was that people just show up your back door like all times of the day. And it was more so 15, 20 years ago when we started traveling here. But the pot of tea would be on the back of the stove because you never knew who was going to be stopping by. And you stopped whatever you were doing and that person became your priority. And if you look at today, for me, it'd be like I'd have to fit you in. If you come to my back door, I don't know if I can talk to you, right?
Yeah.
And it's so different. I can't just stop and have
Yeah.
a conversation. So it's changed in what is possible in that community network.
Yeah.
But we are so quick to think we're communicating by scrolling on our phone and commenting on a post, and that's
Yeah.
our interaction, but it's the actual face to face interconnection of two people with the intention to be supportive to each other. I just want to bring that forward for people because that's what engages your enzymes to start your healing process, but you can't do that when you're scrolling. It doesn't work the same way. So if that's the way some of you that are listening think about, well, that's the time when I connect with all my friends, it's an artificial one because it isn't actually doing a physiological response in the same way.
You're not really releasing the oxytocin if you're online, the happy hormone. And the
Mm-hmm.
other part too is that if you are scrolling on Facebook, either people, it's now called doom scrolling, right? You see all the bad news, or you see people posting the highlights of their life that make it look like they have it all together. I mean, isn't that what Facebook is for? We post the happy
Mm-hmm.
photos. But if
Yeah.
you're feeling like you're suffering from something and you're overwhelmed and you start seeing all your friends doing all these fabulous vacations, and I mean, I love to celebrate my friends' fabulous vacations, but if you're feeling really down, it doesn't make you feel any better to feel like everyone else has it all together except me. The reality is none of us really have it all together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where that conversation over tea, you discover that in the conversation, not through the posts. Yeah.
Yep. Very
Yeah.
true.
Uh, well, we talked a little bit about this. I wanted to dive into patterns that you observe about isolation. Um, I know since COVID, even for my, I love being at home. I love my house. I could go 3 or 4 days with ever leaving my house and I'm totally fine. But then I realized after COVID, that was a pattern that came in and I made it okay because I enjoy being here. But that pattern isn't very helpful. Do you want to talk about some of the things people often come to you with and how they've kind of botched themselves into the corner?
Well, it's funny because I always assign homework and my clients always laugh because for weeks on end, when I'm first treating someone, my homework is I want you to go call a friend or do something with someone else and have fun. I want you to rediscover the carefree child that was once within you. And I mean, obviously, I have longer talks with clients, and sometimes I will say, when's the last time you felt completely carefree? Like the world was your oyster. It's usually before they were 10 or 11 years old. I
Ooh,
find that,
yikes.
I know that really, it still shocks me every time when they say, well, yeah, when I was five, this, or when I was seven, this. And so I say, okay, got some rediscovering to do. But I often say, like, go do something silly. Now, I'm sure you're very aware of the Japanese concept of forest bathing, going
Mm-hmm,
out in nature, and all sorts of studies have shown the value of being out in nature. But I will say to my clients, find somebody to go for a walk within the woods. Just
mm-hmm,
go to the woods, do something fun. But you're right, COVID. turned us all into hermits, whether we wanted to be or not. And those of us who are introverts have had, I think, a harder time coming out. I love my home. I tend to be a hermit by nature,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a husband, I have grandchildren, I have children. I see them several times a week. And so I'm not a hermit, but I love to read. My first go-to would not be to call a friend to go and do something. I'd be
Mm-hmm.
over a good book. But as I say, because I have family who will call and say, Grandma, can we come and do this? I avoid being a hermit. But for my overcoming that sense of shame, I don't want people to see that I'm really struggling. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, well, that's if you still want to wear that mask that everything is fine, but that's not working for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having the courage to reach out to someone and say, I'm not okay, and I'd like to go for a walk.
That's as I slowly have pulled out of teaching dance, the last piece that has remained is teaching little people,
Hmm.
because that's just such joy to go in and just discover they don't care. They're just going to do their thing, and you get to do your thing with them. And it's just so lovely. And my grandson, it's the same thing, is discovering that wonderment. So I adopt grandchildren because I'm like, yep, need more of those little people around me, because they do remind you to stop and play and don't be so busy about getting away from those little craft pieces and stuff that you don't think are that important, but really do allow you to just move into not having to worry about anything.
Help us reclaim our inner child.
Hmm.
Because with a little child, we can be silly. They're silly and we're silly, and it's a breath of fresh air. Yeah, everybody needs to find a kid somewhere. Adopt.
So I said I'm
I'm
just going to keep adopting a whole bunch of them. And that's always been so much fun. Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. All right, now I wanted to with this season, I really want to talk about how our choices about ourselves and our health affect everybody else around us. So we've talked a little bit about reach out to that friend. They probably have already observed that you're not doing well. They're probably happy to be the one that you chose to come and do something with, and happy to listen as long as you're willing to make that change and not just continually soundboard on them. But out of that us either not participating in getting better affects everyone around us, or it can, our active participating in getting better can affect everyone around us. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that means for our communities?
Well, we talked about earlier on the importance of resilience, which we've sort of been talking all the way around through this entire conversation. And I always think it's important to note that resilience is a muscle. I mean, it's not technically a muscle, but I think of it as being a muscle, which means if you practice skills that build resilience, you will become more resilient. And in our communities, we have all sorts of people who've gone through stuff and have become more resilient. And exposing ourselves to those kinds of people, often in seniors' homes, there are people who've gone through, there are still people who've gone through, the Great Depression or some of the wars. And we tend to focus on, woe is me, I'm so stressed, which is true, and our feelings are always valid. But sometimes hearing how other people have overcome adversity can motivate us to work on ourselves. And then as we start to see ourselves get better, we look at the people around us and realize I'm setting an example for the people around me. It's not just about me. It's about, my children, my grandchildren, my friends. If they see that I'm really working on improving my health, they notice that. And then that may inspire them to work on themselves. And when people say things to me like, oh, you're so resilient, which I do hear because I've been through a lot of grief and loss in my life. And people say, you're so resilient. And I say, well, it's because I've had a ton of bad things happen that I had to work through. And that's how you develop resilience is by overcoming things. And I think that it's really important in our communities that we come together and drop the mask that we're all okay. We're not all okay. We all have stuff we're dealing with, and also to encourage others and give hope. So many people, especially now with all the stuff going on in the world, many people feel hopeless. We know that anxiety rates in teens has skyrocketed. So I really think it's important that we develop that sense of hope for ourselves, but then also share that with others, that there is hope. That's one of the things I love most about working with people who have overcome trauma, because I've overcome trauma. And I'm not speaking to my clients from a textbook scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, hey, I've been there. I've wanted to not go on. Like I know what that feels like, and there is hope. And we have a
Mm-hmm.
clear path. We can build resilience.
Yeah. Wow. People just, I think people really underestimate the power of those around us, and listening to those stories. I know here we have our little museum. It's a tiny little space. 60, 70 people will cram into that space once a week to hear stories. And our community, we're pulling people out from all different nationalities and situations. And just those telling of stories creates incredible opportunity. And then the musicians are all there as well. And so you'll have music that'll come from here. It's a lot of Celtic music, so it's
Yeah.
of a time. So it's not necessarily the 20s and 30s and whatever, but you have tunes that people were more a part of in the 30s and 40s, and they come back again in a wave. But that also brings about this shift for people, and it's a way that I think that what drew us to this community, it's the way that this community kind of functions. And so
Yes.
even though we're in a rural community, there's still this incredible sense of we may not know you, but we all have a vested interest,
Yeah.
and it's really quite something. So I know in the city centers that's a little bit harder to try to find those right people, but that's where volunteering, finding something that you really value,
Mhm.
working with animals, going to the SPCA, just that opportunity to see where can I put my hand in, and you're always gifted back in return. So
And I say to my clients all the time, because again, they're not working right now, and I say, everyone needs to have a sense of purpose and meaning. And they may be at home feeling like I'm useless, I can't work right now. But I say, find an organization whose values you are passionate about and get involved. Uh, just find out where your tribe is hanging out, the people who are like-minded, and do something to make a difference. And my clients often share stories. And I mean, the power of storytelling is a whole other separate subject, but they often share stories about, things that they've done. I was talking to a paramedic, and she came across a scene where someone was injured. It was an elderly man, and he fell in a grocery store parking lot and was bleeding. And so she went over and asked him if he was okay and helped him up. And, the store people came out to help. And she asked his wife where the car was parked, and his wife was so rattled she couldn't remember. So she walked around the parking lot with the wife, pressing the panic button until they found the car. And she said afterwards, I know it was a really minor thing. She said, but it just felt so affirming. This is a woman who's pretty much agoraphobic and hardly goes out and feels like her life is over because she's no longer able to do anything. And here she just came home feeling like I made a difference in that elderly couple's life.
yeah,
We all
yeah,
need that meaning and purpose.
yeah. I heard on the radio this week too about for our children, it was don't talk to strangers, but actually teaching them how to talk to strangers, and then how to make the interaction so that if they ever needed help, they would
Mhm.
know how to have an interaction and know whether they were safe or not. Um, yeah, which was an interesting approach because we do kind of do that whole I don't know these people, so I'm just going to step back, and I'm going to pass you on the sidewalk, but try not to
Oh,
get too close because we had a pandemic, like all
I'm
these
laughing
silly
because
things.
my middle child, who's almost 40, when he was little, 3 or 4, would ride his tricycle down a few houses in each direction. We'd always be watching him, but I would see him talk to people. And I remember distinctly one time saying, Alex, why were you talking to that stranger? And he said he wasn't a stranger. He said his name was George. But he
Right.
talked all his life, and now his 11-year-old son talks to strangers all the time, and we just laugh. That's who they are.
That's who they are. Yeah, and my grandson will sit at the table in a restaurant and have a great conversation with the waitress.
Yep. Yep.
Whereas my daughter would have hidden the whole time. She would be like, you order for me, I don't want to talk to anybody. And my grandson is, I'd like a glass of water and I'd like it to have ice in it, please. And
Yep.
here's what you can do for me. Yeah, that's a lovely. All right. In your practice, what strategies have you found to be most effective in helping people root themselves and get back to relationships?
I think the number one thing is helping people reframe their feeling of guilt and shame that there's something wrong with them. So that's why I do a lot of explaining about the neuroscience behind the stress response so that they understand, oh, my brain is not broken. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And the fact that I can't work anymore is because I've seen too much and my brain has told me to stop. So the first step really is reframing of what is really going on. And I joke and I say, it'd be easy if you had a broken leg, 6 weeks in a cast, and then you can walk again. But when it's a trauma, like a mental health injury, we're not really sure how long it might take and we can't predict, but we just take one baby step at a time. And my clients often laugh when I assign something really small. I'll give you an example. A woman who was agoraphobic and couldn't leave her house. And she did manage to get to an appointment with me, but her husband had to bring her because it was very traumatic. And she said to me, I know I should go out for a walk with my dog. I know I should exercise, but I just can't seem to even get dressed in the morning. I said to her, okay, here's your homework for next week. I said, every day this week when you get up, I want you to take off your pajama bottoms and put on your gym yoga pants or whatever and your running shoes. I don't care what you wear on top, wear your pajama top, your negligee, I don't really care. And she said, okay, and then what? I said, nothing. I said, you can go back to bed if you want. I don't care. Just get your running shoes and your yoga pants on. And I could tell she was thinking, okay, this therapist is a little odd. But she came back the next week and she said by about day 3, when she's sitting there on the couch in her running shoes and her yoga pants, her husband said, do you think you can go in the backyard with me? And she threw the frisbee for the dog for 40 minutes. And it was the first time she'd been out in the yard with her dog, and I'm not really sure how long. And she said, if I didn't already have my shoes and my running pants on, I wouldn't have gone out. I said, yep, baby steps. Now she goes for 5-kilometer walks with her dogs by herself. It's fine. But
Wow.
taking those small steps. One of my favorite books that I recommend to everyone is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about the value of making really, really small changes. So if I said to a client, okay, I want you to invite 5 friends over for lunch, not happening. They're barely getting out.
Mhm.
Could you call one friend for a few minutes? Could you? I had a client, I said, can you just go sit on your front porch for just a few minutes and watch cars go by? It's a matter of baby steps, doing small things, celebrating the wins, and learning not to feel, well, I shouldn't say not to feel, we feel how we feel. Learning to counteract our feelings of guilt and shame with self-talk that says, I am getting better. When my clients get discouraged and they say, I don't feel like I'm getting better fast enough, I say, so a year ago when you came to me, you were doing this. Now what are you doing? And they're like, oh, right. Okay, yes, I definitely have made huge improvements. And whether it's in sleep or nutrition or exercise, it's not a matter of, we hate New Year's resolutions because we're all going to, I don't know, lose 50 pounds, stop drinking, do all this stuff. And then by January 15th, the gyms are empty again. And I always say, just pick one small thing, make one small change. And when that sticks, move to the next. And when you fall apart and you eat that chocolate bar, even though you were determined to eat healthier, you just forgive yourself and go, okay, fresh start.
There you go again. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's the same when either working with clients or in my group setting, because nobody remembers the first day. There's too much trauma behind how they got there
Mhm.
and what was going on, but they don't remember that first day, but we remember the first day.
Yeah.
And the notes we've taken
I
remember
know.
the first day, or if some I take photographs so that we've got what does that first day look like, and then as each small change happens, it's the other stuff is all forgotten.
Mhm.
It doesn't exist anymore, and they have no reference point for it, and there's no reason to even go back there, which is why it doesn't feel like they've made any strides,
Yeah.
which is always interesting to me because when people say, nothing changed for me, or you're right, it was not fast enough.
Yeah.
Well, what speed did you want to go at? Because you weren't using, you were doing one little exercise at a time, So if you wanted to go faster, you might have needed to do a few more things.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that out for people because that happens a lot when you start to reflect and go back and you say, well, when I saw you last week, this was a beautiful example. I was teaching at a conference, and there was a man with posture that was just hunched right over, really tall man, and he was hauling all of these massage tables. In my mind, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that poor back is just like struggling to be able to do these moves because of the posture. And he came and he took our movement class that we were offering. And in an hour and a half, he went from this incredible snaky, rounded posture to standing up straight. And he had still a little bit of an incline on the head, but he had completely changed in an hour and a half. And all we did was some really simple exercises, but we went for coffee or tea with all the other courses that were going on. We all just kind of met together. And one of the other massage therapists came over and said, "What were you doing in that class? I can't believe your posture. It's amazing." And the person, this is an hour and a half later, said, "What are you talking about?" Had no idea how dramatic that change had been. It was so cool. But that's the example of you don't realize, because even if you do that exercise, go for the walk, you don't think you've done very much, people notice your head's a little higher, your eyes are a little brighter. The smile comes onto your face easier. The way you say things doesn't have a bite rate behind it. And there's just all these subtle little things that everyone else can notice. And we usually are just oblivious, which I guess is a good thing. Yeah.
Another good reason to have people around us in our support network because they will notice things and say, wait a minute, 6 months ago you wouldn't have done this and now you can do this. This is great. I mean, having people who know us and can cheer us on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other one too, it's another client just this last week and a half. I didn't progress far enough, and I thought I'd be a lot further along. And the thing that they had come in for was their relationships with their children had been, just fallen completely apart, and they were arguing all the time, and they shouldn't be living together and everything. And there was actually harmony at home, and they were doing things together. And I kind of chuckled. I was like, okay, so which part, you've solved the relationship piece, and then you moved all your troubles over into your work life. And that wasn't even on the radar when you came through the door. And I just give these examples for those of you who are listening that maybe some of these things are things you've done, but realizing how those stresses may have affected you, what you are looking at, you might have changed things already, or you haven't changed things, and then what's possible and what'll fall away. They won't be there forever, even though sometimes we think they will. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If someone feels like their inner warrior has gone quiet, what small step would you say today for some people to try? I know you gave a couple really good examples just a moment ago, but
I think we all have times when we feel like we just can't keep fighting anymore. And I encourage people to take some time to just rest and recharge. Many years ago, when I taught at the university, I had a young woman who was in the depths of despair. She came to me on, I think it was a Thursday night, and had told me that she wouldn't be able to complete an assignment that was due. Her fiance had cheated on her and they had just broken up and she was devastated. And she wasn't even sure she was going to stay in school. And I said to her, "Where do you live?" Well, she lives in Toronto. I'm in Peterborough, so she's only an hour and a half away. I said, "Is your mom home this weekend?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." I said, "Okay, here's your homework. I want you to go home tomorrow on Friday. I want you to crawl into bed. I want you to cry, drink tea, eat chocolate, let your mom comfort you, and just grieve and sob. And then Monday morning, you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to go, that's all he gets. And you're going to let the warrior come back again." And I basically said to her, it's okay if you don't feel like you can do this. It's okay not to be okay. But you're going to go home and let mommy take care of you. And as I say, drink tea and eat chocolate. The nutritionist listening like, Diane, don't recommend chocolate. Chocolate,
there are times.
there are definitely times. Chocolate, the phenylalanine has its place. But I didn't, she came back and she finished school. And then when it was time for convocation, her parents came to talk to me. And I was so touched because they said, you saved her education. You didn't tell her, buck it up, you'll be fine, get over it, or there's more fish in the sea, or any of those things. They said you gave her permission to completely fall apart with a plan to pick herself back up again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was 25 years ago, probably, but I've never forgotten that story because somebody had to come along and say, you're not okay. You're totally not okay. And you can't do this by yourself. And that's okay. So
Yeah.
when we feel like the inner warrior's light has gone out, sometimes we have to curl up somewhere else and regroup and then maybe find someone to help us relight the fire.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece I really enjoy about that whole bit is that forward motion. Because so many people don't think of that forward motion. You have this length of time, and then it's time for you to be empowered and take that step. And so that those people that kind of keep going around in a circle, they
Mhm.
gave themselves permission, but they didn't tell themselves when they were going to finish it. And to
Well,
be able
I
to
have,
step back out. And not saying that you're not going to have another day where you want to just go and
oh yeah,
repeat the process again, which you just might, but at least you know that's okay because I just need now I need it for me. I don't need it for him and I'm not going to spend much more time on that, but I need it
yeah.
for me so that I can get myself to the next space. Yeah.
I have a strategy I use with a couple of friends. We call it a 10-minute pity party. We've
Mm-hmm.
been doing this for years. And what we get to do is one of us will call the other two. We'll get on a conference call or a Zoom call now. Technology's improved. And whoever is really upset about something will say, okay, I need a 10-minute pity party. So we organize it. And then someone will set a timer for 10 minutes. And for 10 minutes, whichever one of us has the issue, we get to whine and complain, cry if we need to, be completely unreasonable. And no one gets to say, come on, you're a grandmother, you're a therapist. Don't you think you should be able to handle this? All people get to say is, oh, honey, oh, gosh. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Just complete validation. But when the timer goes off at 10 minutes, it's okay, the 10 minutes are up. Would you like us to help you find a solution or did you just need to vent?
Mm,
Sometimes we're
nice.
looking for it to be fixed. The really funny thing is, the last few years, when it's been me who's had to vent and whine, it's been like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I've said, okay, guys, thanks. I feel so much better. And then I remember one friend going, you still have 6 minutes. I'm like, oh, good,
Come
good.
up with something.
No, like all I really needed was to have my feelings validated, to have people say, yeah, I would feel awful too. I get that you're furious and want to punch that person out. They don't say, well, violence is wrong. You really shouldn't be wanting to punch somebody. It's just complete validation. But there's an end in sight. They're not going to listen to me for 4 hours, and they're not going to listen to me every day about the same problem. If I were to call up, I haven't done this, but if I were to call and say I need another pity party about the same issue, they would say, okay, hold on. We already talked about this, and you said you didn't want to find a solution, but maybe you do need us to brainstorm with you because clearly that wasn't resolved.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. And how many of us don't want to listen for solutions?
We just
And
want to be.
for long periods of time, our friends have to listen to a lot of stuff because we don't want the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there isn't a solution, but then we can find a way, like, is there something else you can do to distract? Is there something else you can do differently? People often say, people come to me when I do couples counseling and they come with the idea that I'm going to help them change the other person. And I always
Hmm.
say, well, if I could change the other person, I'd be a gazillionaire. I said, all I can do is help you identify the dance you two have gotten yourself into and how we can create a new dance. And each of you need to change your steps.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. I have one question left here. If PTSD has been a part of a stress situation, what can you share that's different for these people than some of the things that we've already talked about?
I'm really glad that you mentioned that because one of the hallmarks of PTSD is hypervigilance. When you have been through PTSD and your brain has sounded the alarm, you are likely to be in a position where your brain is sounding alarm for all sorts of things, whether that's going into a grocery store or I work with a correctional officer. It was really quite funny because he has friends who are correctional officers, and they decided to go out for lunch, the four of them. And one of the strategies we had talked about for him was when you go in the restaurant, you want to sit with your back to a wall so there's no one behind you because of hypervigilance. Well, he went out with these three guys that got a table in the corner, and they were all fighting for the corner seat because all of them subconsciously realized I can't be out in the open. So it's just being accepting of that and recognizing that, yes, we do want to assess realistic risk for sure, but accepting the fact that if you have been through PTSD, what your brain really wants is stability, predictability, and a sense of control. What have we not had for 5 years? Much of that. And,
Mhm.
life situations. So when people say, why am I still triggered by this? Or, a fire truck goes by with a siren and, I have to pull over to the side of the road and do my deep breathing. And I just say, that still triggers you because your brain has a tendency to be hypervigilant. And that's better than not being vigilant at all. We don't want people taking unnecessary risks. But gradually over time, if you're no longer exposed to daily triggers and you're kind to yourself and you follow the 5 pillars, gradually your brain will start to relax and those things won't trigger you quite as much. But it's acceptance of the fact that hearing a code in a hospital, if you've been a nurse who can't work anymore and you have to go to emerge and there's a code and everybody else seems fine and you can feel your heart rate go way up, just to accept the fact that given what I've been through, my brain is a little more sensitive to danger still. Hypervigilance.
Mhm. Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you, Diane. You did say earlier one about your free opportunity, which is for your list. Do you want to just repeat how they can find you, ways they can connect? I know you said website, but maybe there's others as well.
For sure. So my website is just dianewolf.com, and that's DianeWolf. My email is just diane@dianewolf.com. So if someone would like to email me, if you have any questions, that's fine. On LinkedIn, I'm Diane M. Wolf, M for Margaret. Someone else already took Diane Wolf. So on LinkedIn, M. Wolf. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And as I said, if you go to the website, dianewolf.com/stress, you can download a free copy of the Resilience Roadmap, which really helps you identify, what check engine lights is your brain turning on for you, and being aware. And as I say, some of them are also indicative of medical conditions. So it is really important that if you're experiencing some of them, you get yourself checked. But if you're like me and your doctor says, no, your heart's fine, it's just anxiety and stress, then at least you know what to do because I have tools. The Resilience Roadmap lists all sorts of tools that you can use, whether it's deep breathing on a regular basis to foster relaxation or the exercise to reduce the cortisol and adrenaline. Very, very practical tools you can use to put yourself in that optimal level of mental, physical, and emotional health so that you're much less likely to deal with a stress-related illness later on.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. It's been so great.
Yes.
Yeah. So please take advantage of the resources that Diane has offered. And as you go about your day and think about some of the ways we've expressed some of the pieces, you might recognize parts of yourself and then consider what is your wellness plan? Who are the people that are a part of that wellness plan? And what are the resources that you have available to you? And if there's a gap in there somewhere, and you know that that gap needs to be filled, then make sure that you do fill it rather than just ignoring it until it gets into crisis. And so that you have an opportunity to really move yourself forward in the right way.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, beautiful. For those people that have been sipping on tea, we're at the end of the podcast. We're at the end of the opportunity for you to be able to be nurtured and reinvigorated. And I'm hoping built some resiliency of new ideas to move you forward. And so as you go forward, thinking about how you want to go into your day, what you want to participate in, I just want you to think about some of the tools you heard, some of the ones you've been using, and then start to put just some little pieces into your day that are going to start to change the way that you're dealing with stress in the day so you don't have to be built up to that sleepless night where you're going to be trying to find the right way to lie in bed. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, and be well. Take care.
Thank you.